Hey, John.
Hey, guys.
So they did a couple of those things. I know you talked to a couple of NFL coaches like Andy Reid when you were at the owners' meetings. What did they all say on how you help Jayden Daniels in year 2?
So there's a few things. One, it starts with Jayden, right? Like, one thing we know, and I think one reason why everybody feels pretty good about his progression is the work he puts in. So if you don't have that, the rest of it doesn't matter, right? And then it depends on who else you talk to. Like, I talked to Brandon Beane about this, the GM from the Bills, because they had Josh Allen. How do you build on that? And a lot of it is like you protect him. And some of that protection is building a strong wall in front of him, but also, showing him going through plays and showing, okay, here's where you could have saved yourself a hit. Throw the ball here. And I think Jayden got better with that throughout the season. There are things that one of the things he's going to work on, like you talk about footwork and all that. And this is one thing Dan Quinn talked about. Well, he has his quarterback, one of his quarterback coaches is Ryan Porter. That's what he specializes in footwork. Now, some of what he does is introducing more different styles of drops to his game. And he's worked with them on that for many years. So that way you could have a 3-step drop, but take a different 3-step drop to kind of toy with the defense a little bit so they can't time up how they're coming, like how they're reading the play. If you're a cornerback, you see a certain drop, like maybe there's a quick 3-step drop, or versus a, different style of a 3-step drop. It's clearly a more advanced method for a quarterback, and not everybody's going to get this. Jayden has always worked with this. He's worked with this guy since he was like 10 or 11. So he has a handle on that. So that's another way to develop that game and just, get more around him, et cetera. But yeah, it's interesting because, obviously defenses are going to be studying him and he's going to be studying them, and they're playing tougher defenses this year. So you want to make sure he continues to progress. I do think protecting him is the number one thing. And because there are some things like, they run a lot of no huddle, so defenses will study that. Like, how do you then adjust? But I think the other thing that people came away with is that Cliff Kingsbury did a really good job with this group last year, and there's a lot of confidence that he'll continue to evolve the offense with Jayden.
Yeah, one thing I found interesting in the article, you talk about sack percentage and pressure percentage.
Right.
And you do point that Josh Allen improved big time in those categories. What did you see, particularly end of the season there with Jayden Daniels?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the numbers with him down in the last part of the year, but it got, if I remember right, it got better. I wrote this a few weeks ago, so I apologize. But it got better, and I think he got better at some of the time. Sometimes the sacks for him were running out of bounds, just like it was in college. Like, you run out of bounds and it's 0 yards, but it's considered a sack. And so I think like those are some things you take into account. But I think like what happened too, I didn't feel like the offensive line was as solid later in the year in the run game as well. And so I think that contributed to some things. But I felt like and they felt like he got better with getting rid of the ball, and your completion percentage is going to go down in that regard. But if you're saving a sack, then that's okay.
JK, did anything in the in the off-season acquisitions, in free agency or trades, that make you scratch your head at all, or were you pretty comfortable with everything they did?
Yeah,
I was really good. I was really good with the Debo thing. I love that pickup. And then Tunsil is one of the best at his position, so I love that too. But I don't know, just getting your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I did actually had something, I think it came out yesterday, about like how the free agency acquisitions impacts maybe what the direction they go in the draft. And so I think some of the things I liked, first of all, the Tunsil and Debo, like Debo, it's a 5th round pick. Like, I think he's going to be worth that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Tunsil, like you said, you're building that wall. I don't think they're done building that line. And I think, but that is step one. They wanted to get a premium left tackle. I mean, this is where it goes back to what that article, like, build the wall in front of him, continue to protect him. and don't force him to run as much as he had to last year. So I love that. I think the one thing that everybody's curious about was Javon Kinlaw.
Right.
And just not so much that they signed him, but the deal. And now the deal, people look at, it's an average of 15 per year. Well, he's not counting 15 this year. It's $7 million, a little more than $7 million on the cap this year. Like that's not bad at all, with where the cap is gone. Next year it would be like 18. So if he doesn't produce, then it's like, okay, you're living with that for a year. But I think that's the one clearly they know a lot more about him than others do. Right. Darryl Tapp coached him. Adam Peters was in San Francisco with him. Dan Quinn built his career off of, coaching, starting with the defensive line. So those guys know, and they have a plan for him. I think I'm most curious to see what is that plan, and can you unlock more of the consistency from this game than maybe the Jets or Niners were able to do? And I know they feel like injuries played a big part in his and maybe in some of that inconsistency. So we'll see. And I would say like most curious about, because I don't know more than they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just getting your vibe.
Yeah, but I do think that's the one where you say, okay, let's see what they're due there. But by and large, like I liked like the Jonathan Jones signing. I love that because I think he's their kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he gives you some of that flexibility and this goes back to the article I just wrote, like you don't have to get a corner in the first round or second round if it's not there. If you say like, we like this guy better, but we want to get a corner later in the draft to develop, you can do that because you have Jones and Sammer still with Marshawn Lattimore and Igbenogany back as well. So he has the flexibility to go inside or outside, just like Sammer still. So I like that sign. Dietrich Wise, I like that. I think those are, again, their kind of guys. And, he's not a Pro Bowler, but I think he adds depth. I think the D-line depth is better than it was a year ago, 1 through 9, right? And now, do they need more? Yeah, you could use a young pass rusher. But I like the depth that they built. And I think that's important. And so, I don't have any big issues with really anything they did, because one thing too is a lot of these 1-year deals. So, they're not locked into bad deals.
We're joined by John Keim, who covers the Commanders for ESPN.com on the Rude Guest Hotline. So you've reported, John, that the Commanders have met with Ohio State running back TreVeyon Henderson multiple times. Is this we're going to pick him at 29 if he's there, or is this we're going to move back into the mid-30s, maybe 40 range, get some extra picks because we feel like we can nab him at that spot? What do you see as the most likely scenario for the Commanders?
Yeah, and to be clear, they've met with multiple running backs multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, TreVeyon's one of them, but they've met with others a few times as well. So I don't want to overstate one guy at this point. I do think that he would be very good in this offense. I don't know that I see them taking a running back in the first round. And so I think like he's a guy, like if he's sitting there at 61, how do you not consider him?
Mm.
I don't know that he will be there at 61. If you trade back and if you're able to either pick up an extra pick or improve your draft standing, then, with some picks in the third round or whatever, like then I think he would have to be under consideration. I don't know if at 29, I can't say that at 29 he would be, but again, like he's not the only back that they've met with a couple times. So I don't want to overstate that interest. But clearly there is, because he would fit very well with what they want to do. But there are also good backs that they've looked at who will be available in the third or fourth round as well. So I think that's clearly a possibility as well. Because I'm not convinced that they would take a running back at 29.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and then it depends, like, well, how is the board falling? What's there?
Right.
Is there a scenario there's probably a scenario for most things, but, depending on who is or isn't there, I could see, like, if you trade back, is he a possibility? I would have to say, sure, because I don't know that he's not,
How many receivers have they met with multiple times, and would you be surprised if they took a receiver at 29?
A little bit. It depends on who's there, because this is not a draft where teams are expecting a lot of receivers to go in the first round.
Right.
So I think that's, but if a Mecca Ibuka is there, is he a possibility? Sure. But again, I think then it's like, who else is there? I think, to be honest, if there's an offensive lineman there they like, I think that guy is, I could see them running to the podium for that. I think if there's an edge rusher they really like, then that's another possibility. Corners is certainly a possibility, but I think if you want to continue going back to the first thing we talked about, the article about Jayden, one of the things that they talk about is adding talent, and receiving talent would certainly help. I do think there's some guys after the first round, though, that they like. And, and this is like based on number of meetings or whatever. So, and some of this stuff, like you hear, listen, there are a lot of players in this draft that they're going to like that they can't take.
Sure.
So, you know what I mean? It's just like this,
yeah.
But guys like Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, like those guys, Ty Felton, all those guys will be after the first round. So I don't know, if you're going to feel compelled to take one at 29, but it, again, I know I'm an Ohio State guy, but Emeka Egbuka should be a very good NFL receiver for any team. And so you'd have to look at him. But again, then it just depends on who else, what else is available when you're picking.
Most of the I know mock drafts mean nothing. Okay. It's just opinions by these guys, but most of the mocks, I would say 65, 70% have them going edge if they stay at 29. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of edge. I've seen some offensive tackles as well, but I would agree with you. I don't think they're going to take a running back unless maybe a Hampton slipped and they really love Hampton out of North Carolina. But I still don't see them taking a running back in the first round. If they stayed at 29, I could see them going edge or possibly receiver. But I would be very surprised if they took a running back.
And I think certainly, clearly they would like a young pass rusher. There's two things that Dan Quinn will always talk about defenses. One is affecting the passer, and two is taking the ball away. Mm-hmm. So who are guys who can do that? What, is there a cornerback who can do that? Is a safety? I don't know. I'm not sure I don't know, Emin Wari and Starks, I don't know if they'd be available there. The two top safeties in this class probably. So I think edge, but I definitely I put O-line on there. I definitely would put O-line on there because, again, go back. And it's funny because I looked up my article just to remind myself, and the pressure percentage and the sack percentage went up. Mm-hmm. And, again, I think a lot of it is that's what they want to resolve. So, there was definitely some pressure in that interior. Like, if they can improve that, I think they absolutely would. And so I think I would put that definitely on the list of desires that they want to fill. But edge would be their corner for sure. And again, running back is such a deep class that, and it's funny because it depends who you talk to, but like Genty, people would put him obviously number one, right? Beyond that, like when I've talked to some people who feel like there's not a wide variance in this running back class in terms of like talent and ability. So like 1 through 9 or 10 or 2, I'd say maybe 10, put Jenny aside, but 2, maybe the next 8 or 9, there are some people who don't think like there's this big wide variance. So if you got one in the 3rd round or 4th round, the value is there, right? So I think that's something that you have to look at. Now they may not be the same type, but they can certainly come in and help you. That's why I think you could fall there. But like running, edge help. I think I go back to the article I wrote the other day, which is that I don't know that they're going to force that pick. I think what they did is in free agency put themselves in a position where they can get something they really want versus something they really need.
Right.
So if there's not an edge guy, like there are a couple of edge guys, like, they all have questions on them. Mm-hmm. So do you have to take one at 29? There are some guys like there's an Olafadu kid from UCLA who will not go in the 1st round, most likely. But is he there at 61? Possibly. That's a great spot for him. And, so you know what I mean? You get a young guy who can develop and they don't have to come in and be a 3-down guy. So you don't have to force that pick at 29. I think that's the best thing they did in free agency.
All right, John, good stuff. Looking forward to the draft on Thursday. It's John Keim.
We'll talk to you next week
from ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think that they are in a position where they could draft anything. I went on commanders.com while we're talking to them, the official website of the team, and they call it Mock Draft Monday, and they have a different mock draft. And in the first round, the Commanders site points to Yahoo's mock draft, where the Commanders take Omario Hampton with the first pick, running back, North Carolina.
Yeah, Amari and Hampton. If he drops to 29, I think that would be
maybe like if he drops. Yeah,
one of the easiest cards to turn in ever, because I mean, I've seen him going 20 to the Broncos. Like, they desperately need RB help. I don't think he'd be there at 29, but I mean, weirder things have happened on draft day.
But I think the point is that they're not locked into a certain position.
Right.
We think that they'll go edge, but they could easily go with positions that could surprise you.
Correct.
800-636-1067 is the number you want to chime in throughout the show. Daniel Kelly, former New York Jets scout, is going to join us coming up at 9 o'clock as we talk more NFL draft. And remember, in the 8 o'clock hour, 9 o'clock hour, we're giving away tickets to Game 2 of the Caps playoff series against the Canadiens. And we're doing it all day on 106.7 The Fan. Listen every hour from 8:20 a.m. to 5:20 p.m. for your chance to win playoff tickets.